And it's 6 o'clock, so we're going to get started. I'd like to call this regular meeting of the Lansing School District Board of Education to order. Pursuant to Executive Order 2020-129, allowing public bodies to hold remote meetings through July 31st of 2020. Will everyone please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Turn your speaker off.
Will the clerk please call the roll?
Dr. Beverly?
Present.
Dr. Body? Dr. Burrows?
Here.
Ms. Hodgen?
Here.
Mrs. Lawrence?
Here.
Mrs. Lilgy?
Present.
Mr. Lopez? Dr. Rodriguez?
Present.
Mrs. Willis?
Present.
Quorum is present.
Thank you. And I'll remind everyone to please mute themselves unless you're speaking. Thank you. Any additions to the agenda? Seeing none and knowing that we do not have any public comment on agenda items, we're going to move right along to presentations. Our first presentation this evening is a presentation regarding the fiscal year 2021 budget. Superintendent Sinacropi.
Thank you. I remember to unmute. Tonight, Mr. John Lang and Ms. Kim Adams will be joining me for this presentation. You have the PowerPoint that was distributed in the board book and board packet. So if we go to the first page of that, page 1. Thank you, Mr. Lang. We have the 2021 proposed budget board presentation on June 24th. Tomorrow, because of the cancellation of last week's board meeting, tomorrow will be the public hearing on the budget, which begins at 5:30, and then a special board meeting at 6 o'clock. The main purpose is to approve the tax levies and approve the budget for fiscal year 21. So if we go to the next slide, the presentation outline is as follows: assumptions, then we go to revenues, expenditures, and then we've got some pie charts and some other figures in through here, and then a 4-year budget fund balance trend, and then we'll close with questions. Let's go on to the next slide and get rolling here.
Good evening. What we have budgeted for is a retirement rate of an average of 29.3%. We've budgeted for a hard cap health increase of 2%. And our property taxes, which are based upon mills, for general, we've budgeted at 17.5, bonded debt at 4.6, and sinking fund at 2.9. What we don't know are state aid adjustments. What we have done is estimated a foundation decrease of $650 per student, which would be $8,227 per student to $7,577. And that is a net reduction of about $6.5 million. We've also estimated enrollment at 10,000, which is a projected loss of 478 per our blended count on the May state aid status report.
So just a reminder of what our revenues are composed of. It's local revenues, which are, of course, the property tax revenues, as Kim just mentioned. Some miscellaneous revenue, which would include the print shop, rebates that we receive here and there, and USF refunds and some of the facility rentals and leases. Of course, the state aid revenues include the state aid revenue itself and EMISD special ed through transportation reimbursement. also federal revenues that are considered the Ingham ISD Medicaid outreach program. And also from others from Ingham ISD, we have special ed tuition reimbursement, special ed education, and reimbursement for center-based programs. And we also have some revenues that are transfers from other funds, which was primarily the indirect from food service program. And the categorical, which is the grants, which are, of course, little local grants, which are mostly considered donations, state grants, which include 31A at risk, GSRP, bilingual programs, and then federal grants, which are some of the larger ones, which would be the Title I, 2, 3, and 4, plus the REAP program, Magnet, and Peace Grant. And this is just kind of a pie chart of the budgeted revenues we're expecting for next year, just broken down into percentages of each and how those fit into the entire revenue budget projections here and what we're expecting to receive. Sam?
Is this me?
Yes.
Oh, I was just so intrigued. I want to just, the last slide for just a second. You notice our
Sure.
revenue for 154 million. When we get to the end, we'll have a comparison to our revenues from last year, and you'll see where the issues are. So, John, go ahead. Expenditures, big expenditures are staffing, salary and benefits, non-categorical, which would be general fund, almost $80 million. Our department and schools, individual budgets, around $37.5 million, and grant budgets of $43,661,000. We'll see a little bit later on. Well, let's go to the next slide. Excuse me. Okay, is this still me, John? Because I lost my sheet.
This is Kim now.
Okay, thank you.
So our estimated staffing by bargaining group, this excludes the food service and of course our contracted Sodexo workers. For general fund, we're looking at a total of 872 employees, that's FTE. And then for grants, estimated at 305 for a total of 1,177 employees. And we'll true this up with our first amendment once we actually know what staffing levels are in the fall. Our general fund staffing and enrollment data, you've seen this chart before, most of you, and you can see we've estimated 10,000 for enrollment, which is a reduction of 419 students, and also our staffing for the general fund at 872, which is a reduction of 27 staff compared to the current fiscal year, and most of these are from attrition or resignation or funding source shifts. And then for our budgeted expenditures, we're estimating our budget at $160,432,000. And you can see that wages and benefits are, as Sam said, $79.5 million roughly. Discretionary budgets at 37.5. And then our grants, 27% of our budget at 43.6 million. John?
This is just kind of a recap, short little recap summary of our last 4 years of revenues that we've received. Of course, the last FY18 and FY19, those are actual audited. 151, almost 152 million 2 years ago. Last year was just under 157 million. And this year, what we are projecting that was in the Budget Amendment 3 that was passed on the 11th, June 11th, just under 165 million. And then for the proposed resolution that we'll have for approval tomorrow and that we're presenting today, just over 154 million in revenues expected this next year.
I would just point out, just as an addition, just add on to what John said, if you look under state revenues, for FY20 Amendment 3, it's $91,497,000, and we have a reduction of almost $10 million in our proposed FY21 resolution. So as we look through this, I just wanted to point that out. Is what we've talked about many times before, the reduction in state aid and the reduction in students, and it adds up.
And this is obviously a lot more numbers for the different categories of expenditures and the function codes.
John, you got to move it. John, move it forward, please. Next.
Is it on expenditures? I moved it forward.
No, it's not. There we go.
Okay. Don't know what happened there. Technology. Same thing for expenditures, just looking at what we had for the last couple of years for the audited financial statements for FY18, just over 153,500,000, which meant based on the revenues, we used about 1.5 million in fund balance. And then that left a fund balance of just over 12.5 million after FY18. Then fiscal year 19, just under 158 million in expenditures, used about 1.1 million in fund balance. So reduced fund balance at the end of 2019 down to 11.4 million. Then with the budget amendment 3 that was just passed, total expenditures just over 164 million, and increased the fund balance of about 757,000, which means we are right now projecting an increase to the fund balance to just over or just under 12.2 million. And of course, this is the what the budget amendment is now. We had our preliminary audit this past week, and then we'll have our full audit in August. So as in the past, these numbers will change as our financial statements are fully audited and then finalized as the audit is completed. And then those full numbers will be presented likely sometime in November when our partners from Maynard Casterison do their audit presentation. And then, of course, in the fiscal year 2021 proposed resolution that we'll be showing, 160 million in total expenditures. We're expecting to use just over 6 million in fund balance based on those primarily the loss in revenue that we're expecting.
Thanks, John and Kim. Well, we'll entertain any questions. I just want to, before we start, I was at the Capitol yesterday. I know some of you, and I think I sent you copies of what was passed out there. The Senate and House leadership had a proposal that proposed some additional funding per student and some additional money for teachers and several other things. These are all part of a package of bills that are going to be, I guess, heading to the House and Senate, and we're still. Then on June 30th, next week, the governor's task force will announce her findings and what her suggestions are. So I'm guessing that there will be a fair amount of bargaining and going on to see what ends up actually happening. But questions that we have right now. Do I call on somebody or do you, Mrs. Lawrence?
Go ahead. But I know we have Mrs. Willis, Dr. Burrows, and Ms. Lilgy.
Okay, that order, I guess.
Thank you, Madam President. I have 2 questions, and thank you for the presentation. And I'm just thinking how grateful I am for this team for rallying and pulling together for tonight and tomorrow. My 2 questions are, going back to the pie graph where we talk about fiscal year 21, yes, that one, budgeted expenditures. Is it fair to say that that 27% grants may also hold some expenditures of wages and benefits for certain positions?
Yes. Yes, it does.
Okay, just wanted to clarify. And then looking at that final spreadsheet, looking at the comparison between fiscal year 18 and fiscal year 21, we're increasing our expenditures by about $6.5 million, actually close to $7 million. And I haven't found all of that $7 million of why we're increasing our expenditures, especially if we're decreasing our student population. I see a $5 million reduction in instruction and basic programs, a slight increase in pupil transportation, and a slight increase in expenditures related to community service, but can you guys highlight why and where we've had an increase in expenditures over the last 2 fiscal years?
I'll take a shot at that, and then I'll defer to Kim and John. Part of what we're looking at, although you know what, I'm going to let Kim and John talk because I did something wrong.
So for example, if you look at the support services for the instructional staff, you see that, yep, from 12.9 million to 22 million. That's the benefit of the REAP grant and carryover. So there's multiple years of carryover in there. And then if you go down to, I'm looking, the support services, you see it went from 5.9 million central, 5.9 million to 7.9. That also is the benefit of REAP. The first grouping is for teachers and instructional staff. The second grouping is for administrators and administrative leaders. And so that's one of the biggest things.
Okay.
Most of the increases in our expenditures are related to new grants that we've received. So REAP, the READ grant, which is early literacy, and then the climate and culture grant that we've just received this year as well.
Okay, thanks. That's really helpful because when we have student enrollment declines, but we're spending more, I just want to make sure that we can account for that. And the more support in classroom support services we can offer to the kids with those extra dollars would be helpful. We can articulate those. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Burrows?
Hi, yeah, thank you. So I have one question, and it's probably too much to ask as one question, but if you can kind of hit the highlights for me. Do these budget expectations, this budget estimate, include the money we're expecting to have to spend on COVID-related health and transportation expenses? Because I'm imagining we're looking at serious expenses on that front.
The answer is yes and no. And one of the things that we have done with our CARES money and some Title I carryover at the end of the year is that we've ordered a large number of Chromebooks that we will plan on using this school year to assist in the technology that we're going to need. We also have done the same with personal protective equipment and things like that. So we have a large numbers of those things on hand right now. So that's the yes part of it. The no part of it is part of what we're going to be looking at through the discretionary budgets and departments and schools is that they may have to provide some of those things themselves, but the intent at this end is that we'll provide as much centrally as we can. Part of that, though, it's a really good question because part of it is that we're just not sure what we're going to need. And we're sort of, as we go along, we'll make allowances. And Kim mentioned the First Amendment, and we're going to have probably the biggest budget amendment one in terms of what we expected and what it ends up actually being.
But transportation, we don't have that built in yet.
Transportation is built in as we transported this past year.
Got it. But not relative to the CDC guidelines or anything like that. Okay.
Right. That's a huge question mark. I agree.
Thank you.
Mrs. Lilje.
Thank you. And thank you to you and the team for creating this system that is comprehensive and allows us to have the discussion and to ask questions. Thank you. So I guess I have more questions about kind of COVID related money and the legislative proposal that you talked about, that had more money per pupil in it. Is that correct? Than what this budget has?
There is the bill that is being presented has, as I understand it now, is a per pupil increase, but I'm not exactly, I was a little bit confused about what it was actually, whether we could just have it and use it.
Yeah.
I also talked about technology and some things like that. I don't know exactly what it's for.
Okay. I was curious about that. Did
just
somebody
like
want to chime
yeah,
in?
it's like provide just a little bit of additional clarity to that. There is a lot of unknown about what that extra $800 per pupil represents. Is it on top of, or is it in lieu of? That was intentionally vague by the legislature, and I think it was the term I've heard used as an opening salvo in a negotiation with the governor's office.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it's more like think of it as a placeholder for now.
Okay.
And
So it seems like
there's a
Sorry.
range there for right now. No, it's fine. There's just a range there, and it's again, that number is just a placeholder. It likely won't be that, but it could be that if it's clear as mud for you. Right?
Yeah. So as usual, we have to move forward with a big old question mark and an even bigger question mark about the COVID-related expenses and where that money will come from. So is it the intention to move forward with a quote unquote normal budget and look for COVID-related money elsewhere or as part of the First Amendment?
I guess I would answer that this way. And I guess the answer is yes, because we think right now that there's enough built in department discretionary budgets to handle much of what we're talking about. And there was a comment on here from Dr. Body that I want to he had talked about forehead thermometers, and we have purchased a large number of them, and there should be enough now for each building and in many of the departments. So that's another expense that we've already taken care of with our CARES funding.
Great. I just have two more questions. One, I just noticed a decrease in basic instruction, basic programs, and some increases in support services for pupil, instructional staff, operation or transportation, and central. And I just wondered if you could talk about those two things, the decrease in instruction basic programs and the increases in support services.
Excuse me. Instruction and basic programs is Kim as a teaching staff, general.
If she's not there, yes.
Okay, thank you, John.
Sorry, I couldn't
Yes, it
get
is.
my mouse.
I'm sorry. So we did, as Kim talked about earlier, we did quite a bit of cost shifting, REAP and magnet and other things this year. But this would also the less money that we received per student because of the student enrollment drop also.
And Sam, if I may, we
Go ahead.
had estimated 20 FTE reductions due to resignations and retirements in the instructional area.
And your second question was on support services, instructional staff? Is that what, right?
I saw four lines that had increases in support services. There was pupil, instructional staff, pupil transportation, and central. I'm happy to see those increases, but I just wondered if you could talk a little bit more about those.
Said earlier that these were largely due to REAP, magnet, and the new STAR grant that we have. We do some cost shifting because we've hired lots of support staff for social emotional learning, student support specialists, and different things like that. So that would include, Kim, I'm going to say something wrong, so go ahead and finish my thought, please.
So most of the increases are related to the health and the retirement increases on wages. So our health cap increased by 2%, which district-wide, we pay $19.4 million for retirement and $11.1 million in health. The retirement increased about $800,000 just for the general fund. That's not even including all of the grant-funded staff. And that's pretty much it for that one. Yep.
You had also asked about the transportation line, and kind of the same. Dr. Burrows asked that we budgeted as we were going to provide services the same as we did this past year until more is known. But there's also some contractual increases in there, so that's why it's a little bit more this or next year.
Thanks.
And in general, we tried not to impact instruction by lowering mostly our discretionary budgets for departments. We really tried hard not to touch the schools.
Does that answer all your questions, Mrs. Loge?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I believe Mr. Lopez had his hand up.
Yeah, hi. Hello, everybody. I want to go back to the student count. And I know that some kids won't return, may go elsewhere, may do online. Is there any issue with students who, are they going to be counted even if we offer online education versus in-school education? Is it the full amount? Or are they going to do something with that? And is that part of the, is that part of your student enrollment count or the enrollment that you're looking at?
That I started to say that is a great question. It is. In fact, it was talked about yesterday at the press conference by the the Senate and House leadership, and they were talking about that we should be talking about instructional. I don't remember how they said it, but not necessarily seats or butts in seats, so to speak. So right now, as guidelines go for pupil accounting, we can offer a kind of a blended curriculum if we apply for waivers. What I think is going to happen is that the Department of Education will probably waive all those waiver requirements, and this spring in our continuity of learning part of it was just days of instruction. They didn't look at hours at all. So, you know, one of the reasons, and we talked about this at previous board meetings a little bit, is that we were pretty conservative, I feel, on our enrollment projections. And we have, I think that there's a lot of uncertainty about what enrollment will look like in terms of what kind of offerings we're going to have. And not only do we have some, you know, we have families that move and do some other things, we'll certainly have a percentage of families who are going to be not real comfortable having their kids back in school on a regular basis. So we've got to take that into consideration too. I certainly hope that we're way wrong on this projection, but we did what we thought would come in pretty close to what we think it's going to be.
Thank you.
Is there other questions?
I do.
I've
Yes,
got
sir.
questions too.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation. Mrs. Lidgy already touched some of the points I wanted to talk about is the 4-year financial analysis. You know, you had at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or 7 different sections to where the budget is going to be more next year than last year. And you
May I address that?
Let him finish his questions.
Okay.
But that in instruction, other needs is one. You got the other one in the support service, people transportation, having less students. The other one is support service central. You go for 7.6 to 7.9. The other one is community services. We go for 1.2 to 1.3. And the one that you went down is outgoing transfer and other transactions going from 1,200,000 to 800,000. I see some differences there. My concern is having less students. We are spending more money in some of these departments. I think it has to be a reason for that, right?
Well, I'll let Ms. Adams jump in here in a second, but as she earlier, many of these things pertain to staffing, and it's the health costs and the retirement costs that have increased across the board. With transportation, it doesn't necessarily matter how many students you have, as how many routes you have. So we're looking at a similar route number as we've had last year. Whether we have, 6,000 kids riding the bus or 6,400 kids riding the bus. So that's my simple explanation from there. I'll let Kim and John take it on also.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. With the outgoing transfers going down, again, we tried not to impact schools. So we looked at what we can reduce and not impact instruction negatively, or what's going on at the school level, or what may need to go on at the school level. So we reduced that and said that we can get by with what we currently have in each of those funds. We're postponing the funding of those. It's the technology replacement fund that covers our Synergy and our e-finance system. There's enough fund balance to get us through next year. We'll have to add this back next year going into the following year, but for now we can maintain. The increases Sam mentioned for health and retirement, those are part of the reason. Also, when you're looking at amendment number 3, those are not actual costs. So we have many grants, for example, the ones that we listed for the REAP and the READ and the climate and culture and the magnet that run through September 30th. So those budgets are still in there, even though they actually will roll forward and impact next year's budget. And the reason they're still in there is because those areas could still spend up through June 30th. It's a guess.
Questions, Doctor?
No, it's, I believe everything, but my point is how we can use $6 million of the balanced budget, and we didn't really cut some of the things that maybe we should cut, but I understand that maybe it's so difficult. Thank you.
Dr. Beverly?
Thank you, Superintendent Senator Grover, and thank you to the team for a strong presentation on our financial projections. Question about food service and what conversations or any additional guidance we received regarding additional funding for food services that we have cost for food services that we have incurred since COVID.
So I'm sorry,
So we've been spending more on food service than we had originally budgeted for. Have the feds provided any guidance on additional supports and resources?
Not well. The main thing the feds and through the state have done is they've relaxed the regulations on how you can serve meals and things like that, so that we were able to do drop off meals instead of having congregate meals. Now I've heard that term many times from them. We're kind of waiting for some guidance on that, because as we look forward and what happens next year and beyond, is that what's going to change in terms of what those guidelines and what regulations are right now. So I don't have a real good answer for that right now.
Okay.
Ann or Kim, I don't know. Is there anything you want to add?
The only thing I would add is that from the period where COVID started and we started closing schools through the end of the school year, we have been receiving federal funding to reimburse us for our costs. It's through the unanticipated school closure funding. And whether that will reemerge next year or not, we don't know yet.
Okay, thank you. Mm-hmm. I see that Dr. Body placed a comment or comment in the chat that's kind of along the lines of what I was thinking about transportation costs being significantly higher if there are some social distancing practices that go along with any transportation planning for the upcoming year. So to think about using the similar routing budgeting as last year seems a bit undervalued. What are our thoughts on that?
I would say a couple things. One is we've been working with, on a fairly regular basis, meeting with Dean to try to figure all this out. And secondly, there are going to be different guidelines in terms of what that means. So we're going to have some really difficult decisions to make as we prepare for what school in the fall will look like in terms of what we're going to do with transportation, because we have two choices. That we can increase our level of transportation, which runs into a problem because right now, Dean doesn't have the vehicles that they would need to meet that increase. And there's a second reason is they don't have the drivers to meet those increases. So Dr. Body, I read his comment and what you added, Dr. Beverly, it's absolutely true. There may be very different guidelines in terms of how we transport. And we've been looking at, can we stagger the start of school, among that? Do we look at different ways of how we transport students right now? So we're going to continue looking at that. Once again, it's a big unknown, and we decided that we would stick with what we have until we have a better answer right now.
Just to add on to that, we have had a few meetings with Dean's staff to discuss ideas like Senator Croby mentioned. I thought maybe in his last superintendent report mentioned that Dean had looked at our routes, and if we were to have one child per seat, our bus routes would have to change from 73 currently to like 360. So where do you add all those extra buses, and who has the money for it, and who can produce those buses by a manufacturing standpoint even? And that's just our district, not even the whole country really that would be in that extra demand. So even reducing the number of students on a bus, it's like you mentioned just a little while ago that it's not going to reduce the cost because of whether you have one student on a bus or 60 currently, it's still the one route, and it's the time that gets paid for, not the number of students. So definitely looking at many different options and potentials, but yeah, it's still an unknown.
My last question relates to some projections around retirement, and that a move to online instruction might precipitate a mass exodus of sorts. Have we had any conversations? And this is not specific to just Lansing School District. I know that, but there's conversations that the teaching force might look differently because of the changes to instruction. And just wondering what conversations around retirement projections have been.
We're already starting to see that just a little bit right now with, we had a couple of teachers the other day that retired or put in their retirement papers, and that was the reason they gave. They didn't want to, if it was online, they didn't want anything to do with it, kind of thing. And we'll have some like that, but we also have staff who may be leery of coming back to work, and depending on kind of environment it might be for health and safety, which is why we need to be able to accommodate staff members as much as we can, as much as the students, in terms of how we're going to face this issue. And as we look forward, whether maybe we have some teachers that would be more interested in doing an online curriculum. And then we have others, as you said, that would not be interested in that. So we got to try and look, it's going to be very different looking at staffing this year too.
One final question or comment is, when we broached the budget in a previous meeting, we talked about facilitating conversations with our collective bargaining leadership, joining us in the conversations, and just wondering where we are in that planning.
Well, I've met with the leadership twice. Are you saying that we would want to have them come in and like we did at our retreat. Is that what your
Yeah,
question?
that's what we
Okay.
talked about at our previous meeting. Yeah.
Okay, we can that'd be a great ISS. We could plan that pretty quick, and I know we would have lots of participation in that. We've talked budget. We've done 2 different meetings now, and with our leadership of our associations, and it's gone well. Lots of good questions, lots of ideas, and some of them are part of what we presented tonight.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Hello.
Yes, Doctor.
Thank you very much. I have some community people talking with me and other revenues that they are telling me how much we are going to be prepared for our students when they go back to the school. We have a very traditional, normal budget here, but the reality is that our students are going to come to the schools with many other problems, psychological problems, social problems. There are no budget here. Then maybe during the summer, we have to see what is going to be the new reality of our students and how much money we have to use in psychology and social workers and counselors and many other factors that are not here, but they are so important for the students to learn. Then my concern is we maybe need to budget in the future for the needs of our students and how we are going to use the personnel that we have at the district to support the new needs of the students. That is my concern at this time and the community concern.
We haven't forgot that. We go back to what we talked about with some of the grants we have. We have increased the number of student support specialists that are paid for out of categorical funds. And the Office of School Culture is working very hard at looking at what they're going to do starting now, because they'll be starting to reach out to some of their students and families that they've worked with. So they're still working with them over the summer months, but then we'll start looking at the fall, we'll look at what staffing looks like in the fall for staffing those positions to make sure that we have enough support staff, as you said, that can work with all of our students. But it's not something we haven't forgotten. It doesn't show up necessarily on any of the line items, but as part of student support, though.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Is that me, Sam?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I posted a question, and I don't know, in terms of safety and distancing and that kind of a thing, have we considered morning and afternoon sessions in any way, shape, or form? Or is that, I know the cost would go up probably, or maybe not.
Well, I don't know. Yeah, we have. We've considered lots of different things right now. We haven't come up with what we feel is a good answer as yet, but we've looked at that. We've looked at every other day type of thing. We've looked at, like you said. We're also looking at, does it make some sense to have to concentrate remote learning in certain grade levels, and then so lots of different things are under consideration right now. But thank you for bringing that up, because it is something we're looking at. We just don't know what it will look like as yet. Part of it has to go back to our earlier conversation on transportation. As soon as we get that nailed down, I'll feel a lot better about the direction we can go.
Mm-hmm. I have another question that, we're hiring a lot of student support specialists, and that's good. I mean, I'm not saying they're not important, but I think that if a teacher, and this could probably be a targeted kind of thing, where you would place teacher assistants in certain classrooms where needed, or where it's deemed necessary to have another person assisting the teacher, to better serve our students and be able to handle situations, right away, and not have to wait for somebody to come from the other side of the building. So I'm thinking that we spend a lot of money on certain things, and I don't know the efficacy or of the programs. I know at some point we're going to have a presentation on how that is working. Is it effective? And I'm hoping it is. But if there's room for other things, I think that teacher assistance would be a way of dealing with our student population and helping the teacher. If we have large classrooms, that hopefully we don't. But.
I guess my response to that would be sometimes I use the word teachers and it's more of a generic because I mean staff. So we certainly have and value our teacher assistants in lots of different classrooms. So they're part of the equation as we look through how we're going to do things. So I appreciate that observation. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question if nobody else wants to jump in.
Sure.
So I know there's a lot of uncertainty, and a lot of the answers to our questions are justifiably that's something we're still working on or we're operating under extreme uncertainty. A lot of that uncertainty is not likely to go away anytime soon and not likely to end before school starts, given the vagaries of the state budget process and the lack of clarity we have about how the pandemic is going to progress. So my question is, what is our timeline for making these decisions? And once we've made them, how are we planning on publicizing them so that parents know what to expect?
Well, we'll probably have, not probably, I think we've scheduled something in July to present to the board. And the plan is right now is that we have to be done by the planning part of it, which would include, right now it includes the instructional division, but just starting July 9th, July 6th and through the 20th, we're going to be bringing in or including teaching staff and community members to look at what a draft plan looks like. Bottom line of all this is that we have to make a decision and be ready to roll out around the 1st of August. And that would go, and we would do we would have to do community meetings, whether they're community Zooms or make sure we do things on social media. There'd be lots of different ways that we would go out. The other thing I wanted to mention too is that we did do a survey, and you'll be hearing some results of that survey in July also. We did parents and staff on the last 3 months of the semester and what the parent and staff preferences would be for moving forward. So that's part of the planning process also.
Superintendent Sinacropi, could I add something, please?
Oh, certainly. Is that who is that? Eldon?
Eldon. Yeah, Eldon.
Hey.
Right now on our website, there's a link called LSD Reimagined. It has the latest information that came from the executive team about some of the planning. It's under the parents link. It's also on our banner on our homepage. So that'll be a landing place, much like we did the continuity of learning information in the spring. It'll be a living document of the latest information from the administration to families.
Thank you, Eldon. As we have more information, we'll make sure you get it. Tomorrow at 5:30 is the public hearing for this budget. and you'll be looking at passing this budget tomorrow. We don't even have a week now. We have one day. So that'll be tomorrow. So thank you once again, and thank you for your questions.
Thank you, everyone. I know you've worked really hard on this. I just want to remind my colleagues, please don't put questions or comments in the chat. That can be construed as a violation of the Open Meetings Act. If you have questions or comments, please send them to me privately, or feel free to bring them up when it's your turn to ask questions. We're going to move on to our report from the superintendent, Mr. Sidekropi. We are back to you, and I'm going to mute this little baboon.
I don't know. I kind of enjoy that. You got to be sick of listening to me, so this is going to be short. As we end an unforgettable school year for not just Lansing, but across the state and nation, we must carry on. I want to just talk about a couple of dates. June 13th, Lansing had its first drive-through diploma awarding ceremony on June 13th. The ceremony was held in front of the Shirley M. Rogers Administration Building. It was an amazing day. Smiles, laughter, and even tears were the order of the day. In fact, sometimes all three of them were the same person. It was truly an honor to be part of such an exciting day. And, you know, as an aside, we talked a little bit about how we can work in a drive-through diploma awarding ceremony, even if we don't have COVID-19 going on and everything else, because it was truly amazing. You had to almost see it to believe it. I talked a little bit about the press conference at the Capitol held by the Senate and House leadership, and there'll be more information coming on that. And we'll pay attention next Tuesday when Governor Whitmer's panel unveils what they've found. Lastly, I have been the interim superintendent for the past 6 months. I will say that I couldn't in my wildest dreams, or maybe I should say nightmares, imagine the past 3 months. I want to thank the board, staff, and community for your continued support of the school district. Here's hoping that the next year will be a little less eventful. Now, did you knows? I don't even know who's here. Susie.
You said we didn't have to do did you know?
Moving on.
I have mine.
Okay, Eldon.
All right. Did you know the Adult Ed, Eastern, Sexton, and Everett diploma ceremonies will be available on the Lansing School District YouTube channel starting on Thursday, June 25th. Tune in and watch those great ceremonies that Sam just talked about. Thank you.
John.
Good evening again. Did you know, in order to help area hospitals with the impacts from COVID-19, the Lansing School District hosted a blood drive for the American Red Cross at Eastern High School at the end of April. It was able to collect 42 units of blood that will help nearly 120 lives. The Red Cross will also be doing 2 more blood drives at Eastern, one on July 16th from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. and one on July 30th from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. also. The blood drive for July 30th is by appointment only, as they will be giving away tickets to Cedar Point for those who donate. Please check their website for available times.
Kamala, do you have something?
I have something. Actually, I have 2 somethings because Eldon kind of stole mine. So we have launched our Lansing School District Reimagined webpage. So this is what Eldon was referring to a few minutes ago. This is the place where we will house all of our updates and information regarding our planning and decision-making around the return to school plan for fall of 2020. At this time, we are awaiting guidance from the Governor's Return to Learn Advisory Council, which is due to release information to all Michigan schools on June 30th. Please check out the information that we currently have posted on our website to learn more about the work we are doing right now to address the needs of all of our Lansing students moving forward. We will continue to update you as decisions are made. Thank you for your patience as we thoughtfully develop this plan. The other thing, if I may, that I wanted to share was that we had a wonderful but informal celebration at Geyer Park this afternoon. I'm sure you all remember the tragedy of the house fire last fall, where we lost 3 little boys, 2 of whom attended Geyer Park. And working with Smith Floral. They donated 3 trees to be planted in honor of the boys. And the school then purchased some engraved stones with each of the boys' names on them. And Geyer Park staff and some of us from administration gathered today with mom and siblings, and she placed each of the markers underneath the 3 trees. So it was really beautiful and a real nice way to permanently honor the lives of those 3 little boys. Thank you.
That concludes our reports.
Thank you very much, everyone. And I would be remiss if I didn't again mention the drive-through diploma ceremony that we had. I know everyone who was there loved it. It was fantastic. Kudos to the executive team for pulling that off. It was so cool, so much fun. And I do hope that we're able to have some kind of iteration of that in the future, because it was really amazing for the whole city. Thank you, everyone. Moving on to routine matters and old business for this evening, our committee reports. We will start with our facilities committee report. Dr. Beverly.
Thank you, Madam President. Facilities Committee met this morning, discussed a variety of topics, including some upcoming bid recommendations that will be moved to consent agenda for our July 16th meeting. There's a recommendation for lighting and door access at Hill, totaling $200,264. There's a recommendation for bid to repair the parking lot at North Elementary for $171,380. We also discussed a forthcoming update to the lease agreement at Hill with Lansing Police Department. There's some cleaning up of some clerical information within the document, but a forthcoming signature. This is for a 3-year lease. In addition, we had a conversation around Eastern Fields and seeking some legal ramifications with the insurance company. There's talking about potential for engaging an outside counsel who has expertise in this area, as well as inquiry about the likelihood of a settlement and what a satisfactory settlement figure might be. We had a conversation around the new water main at Everett. There's continued dialogue with the Board of Water and Light in the City of Lansing. We received differing legal opinions on who is responsible for an update to hydrants, and that conversation continues. We also discussed the drainage behind Eastern, and there are 2 options on the table, but we are currently waiting for an agreement with some external partners around an easement for the options, and we are also seeking a bid recommendation for fencing around that area. Our next meeting is scheduled for July 8th. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Dr. Beverly. Moving on to the Promise Committee, Mr. Lopez. Mr. Lopez, you're muted.
Thank you. Okay. The board has not met since my last report, but I do want to remind you that a newsletter was sent by Mr. Shaheen. And if you didn't get it, let me know so that I can forward it to you. That's the way of keeping us abreast of what's going on more regular basis. In that sense, other things that are going on with the Promise. That's all I have for today.
Thank you, Mr. Lopez. Moving right along to our consent agenda for this evening. Our consent agenda this evening includes the approval of the June 11th, 2020 regular meeting minutes and receipt and approval of the treasurer's report for the month of May. May I have a motion? Don't all talk.
Madam President.
It's been moved by Dr. Body, supported by
I support.
Dr. Rodriguez. any questions or comments? Mr. Lopez?
Yeah, are you going to give just a quick review of the budget in terms of donations and what have you?
Yes.
Okay.
Dr. Burrows, go ahead.
I was going to give people an option to say something before I jumped in with my narrative.
Got
So the detailed treasury report between May 1st and May 31st of 2020 is attached to this evening agenda. Here are a few highlights. Beginning cash and investment balance was 15.8 million. Receipts totaled 10.6 million, and disbursements 15.5 million. The ending general fund cash and investment balance on May 31st was 10.9 million. The general fund's cash and investment balance is 1.5 million lower as compared to the same time last year. The district received donations from Jersey Mike's in the amount of $27.71, and from various other donors supporting food service related to COVID-19, we received $600 there. Mrs. President, this concludes the May 20th Treasurer's Report.
Thank you very much, Dr. Burrows. Any further questions or comments? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Dr. Beverly?
Yes.
Thank you. Dr. Body?
Yes.
Dr. Burrows?
Yes.
Ms. Hodgin?
Yes.
Mrs. Lawrence?
Yes.
Mrs. Lilgy?
Yes.
Mr. Lopez?
Yes.
Dr. Rodriguez?
Yes.
Mrs. Willis?
Yeah.
Motion passes 9-0.
Thank you very much. Moving on to our action items for this evening. First up is our MHSAA membership resolution. May I have a motion?
Mr. President,
Dr.
I made a motion that the Board of Education adopt the Michigan High School Athletics Association for 2020 to 2021 school year.
It's been moved by Dr. Rodriguez, supported by Dr. Beverly. Dr. Rodriguez, did you call me Mr. President?
Yeah, because I was thinking still Mr. Sinecropi was in charge.
Well, Mr. Sinecropi's not in charge, and it's Madam President.
No, well, I'm sorry. I cannot see you. You are in the other
okay,
page.
Doc. It's okay, Doc. I love you. Ti amo, Doc.
It's good to have these different moments. Thank you.
Any questions or comments on this action item? All right. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Dr. Beverly?
Yes.
Dr. Body?
Yes.
Dr. Burrows?
Yes.
Ms. Hodgin?
Yes.
Mrs. Lawrence?
Yes.
Mrs. Lilgy?
Yes.
Mr. Lopez? Mr. Lopez, you're muted.
Yes.
Thank you. Dr. Rodriguez?
Yes.
Mrs. Willis?
Really hope we're talking about action item A.
Yeah.
Okay, good, because I had to run and stop my child from following down the stairs because she pushed the baby gate down. Yes.
Okay. Motion passes 9-0.
Thank you very much. Moving on this evening to new business and discussion items. And our first discussion item for this evening will be something that Dr. Beverly and Mrs. Willis and myself wanted to bring up to the board. And that would be the impact of public protests and the support that we will be able to offer for the students next year. And again, I'm going to ask my colleagues to remember to mute yourselves when you're not speaking, just because your background noise can be a little bit distracting. Ms. Hodgin, can you please mute yourself? Thank you. So obviously we're living in tumultuous times. We have, even in our own smallish city, we have protests happening. we're in a time of social upheaval. And we want to make sure that as a district, we're paying attention to that. We're mindful of that. And we're not only thinking of the mental health impact that our students are going to have just being out of school since March, but also seeing what they're seeing on the news, what we're all seeing on the news, and what they're hearing about and what they're inundated with every day. We want to make sure that we're mindful of that. We're paying attention to that. We're putting those resources in place for them, but we also want to change with the times. And we want to make sure that, like we've always been in Lansing, we are celebrating our diversity, but we want to make sure that we're ahead of the curve and we are offering students resources and supports that they need in order to feel safe and secure and thrive in our district. With that said, Dr. Beverly, if you're ready, I'm going to let you take it away.
Thank you, Madam President. Is there a way I can share my screen? Do I need special permission, or I can just click share?
Should be able, yeah, you should be able to.
Can we all see?
Yep.
Great. So here are a list of some thoughts that I had that the district could conversations around. The Lansing School District should engage an outside facilitator for an equity audit. I feel like there are a number of qualified organizations that do this type of work. I think it is appropriate for us to engage with an outside voice in performing said audit. I know that one that particularly comes to mind, Dr. Muhammad Khalifa has already been engaged with the district in other ways around a book study of one of his resources, cultural competency leadership, or something of that fact. I think Ms. Diaz might be able to speak to that. Another recommendation I put forward is Lansing School District should develop a plan to support Black students upon return this fall around general well-being, number one, and post-trauma in light of racial tensions in our community and across the country. I believe that it would be necessary to address some of the mental health challenges that come from post-traumatic stress disorder that many Black folks around the country are experiencing in light of some police brutality and other forms of racial oppression. The Lansing School District should create a steering committee with a focus on Black history curriculum. I think that we have a strong process for steering committees and curriculum around English language arts, around math, around science, around social studies. And I think establishing a steering committee around Black history curriculum would go a long way to highlighting some of the successes in the history of Black Americans in our country. And then finally, the Lansing School District should continue to invest in professional development focused on culturally responsive leadership and instruction. I think we've led the way in our community and surrounding districts in terms of professional development in this particular area. I think we should continue to invest in order to support our education professionals in engaging with our youngsters. And with that, I'll open it back up for conversation.
Mrs. Willis.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you, Dr. Beverly, for lifting this conversation. I think it's incredibly important that we have a comprehensive plan. And you can continue sharing your screen if you don't mind. Just to your first point, as we're looking at engaging an outside facilitator for an equity audit, I know that there's definitely some great resources there, and I think it would be important for us to also list what goals we would hope to have with that audit and what we would do with that information. I don't want this to be something that we invest in and then don't take the next step. And then as it relates to number 3, just looking at the idea of making sure that we utilize external stakeholders as appropriate, or community folks involved with that steering committee. I definitely think that's something that we should move forward with as soon as possible.
I like both of those thoughts. Thank you, Mrs. Willis.
Dr. Burrows.
Yeah, I think this is outstanding, and I'm really excited that Dr. Beverly brought this forward. One thing, and I'm not sure whether it fits in the equity audit or whether it fits in somewhere else. Issues have been brought to my attention, and we know that the whole issue about the relationship between how we structure physical security in an equitable way, and how that tends to have a really deleterious effect on Black Americans. And there's a concern about whether this is happening in our schools. So if we're having an equity audit, I think something we need to take a close look at is, what's our policy and what's the frequency of, referrals to the police? How are we handling that? We've talked a little bit about that on the board since I've been there, but we haven't really made that a major focus lately. And I think given the current contexts, we need to be crystal clear in our own minds, but also we need to have good information from the outside of someone evaluating us, so then we can share with others what we're doing, knowing that we're fully informed about what's happening in our schools. But again, really good.
Can I jump on that really quick? I know Mr. Lopez's hand is raised, but to those points, Dr. Burrows, I did send a list of questions to the superintendent, especially as it relates to referrals and our use of law enforcement in the schools. I know a lot of us have seen and received letters from the community that have been supported by some community action groups. And Dr. Beverly, we can still see your screen. We just want to make sure that, and I was just curious about our level of referrals that we've received, as a lot of the information that we've received in those, a lot of information that we received in those emails are national statistics, but I'd really like to see what our local numbers are compared to those equity issues. And that certainly could be part of an equity audit that we do with an external firm or internally, but those were definitely questions that I raised to the superintendent this past week.
Mr. Lopez, Dr. Burrows, are you done?
I'm done.
Okay, Mr. Lopez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, certainly. I do appreciate this, Dr. Beverly bringing this to the board. And certainly the number one, the equity audit is certainly needed, even though I think some of this work could have been done by the culture and climate process that we wanted to happen, and but this is good. I also want to remind the board that we're a minority majority school district, and what is happening right now with the Black community certainly is something that we need to address, obviously, and I'm in full support of it. But we also have other individuals of color, students of color that are suffering as well. So we need to keep that in mind as we go through looking at this equity audit and fold in those other needs of our district. But certainly I'm glad that this is coming to the board. And I think this would give the board more of a sensitivity to things that are happening in the district and that we need to pay attention to. So certainly, thank you, Dr. Beverly. Thank you for bringing this to the board.
Thank you, Mr. Lopez. In crafting this language, I went back and forth with myself several times about whether to include Black and Brown students as a part of this particular conversation. My wife is Latina, and my daughters Latin descent as well. But I think the national conversation, and even the local conversation as of late, is targeted primarily on black students, and so and black folks, and wanted to keep the focus on that as of now. And I think, as you mentioned before, I think an equity audit will highlight areas for growth for all of our students, Black, Brown, white, Native, Asian, and others.
Sure. And I, like I said, I think that equity audit is certainly one of the things that we should do immediately. And but just to point the fact that, yes, I agree. The focus has been right now on the Black community, and that's fine. We should do everything we need to do. But this gives us, hopefully, to the board, the sensitivity needed to address these issues that also affect other students in our district. So again, thank you.
I agree with that.
Okay.
Madam President,
Doc.
thank you very much. Last meeting, I said clearly that we should have these topics in the agenda every time that we meet. We are in different times. A big change has to happen. Has to be in the curriculum, has to be in the attitude, has to be in everything else, because what we were doing finally didn't get the results that we wanted. Then I am glad that we are going to have a committee to present and to have a process to really to create a big change, a real change for our schools, that we can affect all the students, but especially the one they are suffering the most. Then yes, I hope that this committee is going to have representation for the board and a special emphasis in the changes, not only from the students, from everybody that works in the schools and around the schools. There are necessary changes. The second is going to be about the survey, and maybe the survey is not going to be only about equity, but it's also about inclusion, and then maybe other things that we need to know. Because if the board doesn't know what is going on in the schools, how we can present solutions. Then that is two things that we need to come back and study, and don't let anybody to take the leader. We are responsible for what is going on in the schools, and if we don't do it, we should blame ourselves. Thank you.
Thanks, Doc. I agree with that as well. I'm happy to continue this dialogue anytime we meet and continue to update ourselves. I would ask that we more formalize a resolution, and anyone that's willing to support that effort, appreciate that help. And from there, we can work with administration in pulling off these 4 action items.
Please let me know any way I can help support you in putting a formal resolution together. Right.
Thanks, Nathan. Appreciate that, Dr. Burrows. Other comments or questions, anyone?
Oh, yeah.
Mr. Lawrence, does he have something to say?
Yeah. So are you asking also for maybe a special meeting or a retreat of the board on this issue, or are you just talking about putting together a steering committee and then coming to the board?
I would be open to a more formal conversation, for sure. I mean, I think something this important warrants that.
Yeah.
I
would recommend, that's to say that I would recommend that we have a board discussion, okay, and to really get into this, I appreciate what we have here, but I think we really need to,
yeah.
meet and make some sort of decision going forward.
Yeah, these were definitely discussion items. I think that there are recommendations for things that we could do. How we get to them and what that looks like definitely needs all nine of our voices to shape it.
Yeah.
Dr. Beverly, I think I've been very vocal in the past about not just making resolutions or sending out statements, because I really think that the action and the outcome of those actions is more significant than any letter we could pen. But I definitely think in this instance, to charge the district with having some therefore be it resolved outcomes, I think would be significant. So in whatever we do in setting the charge for this, I think that having a resolution that outlines that this board has set this charge forward, I think would be really important. So what I'm thinking is maybe the board in a subsequent conversation can review a resolution that sort of outlines these charges that you've identified in these discussion points. And then essentially charge that steering committee with foreseeing those. And that steering committee, I would imagine, would consist of both board members and community stakeholders. That's just one recommendation of moving forward. I'm certain there's certain other paths forward, but that was just one way I was thinking.
Definitely on board with.
What I'm envisioning is that similar to our bond and steering and sinking fund committees, I'm imagining essentially an equity committee, so to speak. I think that obviously we need to put a little bit more thought into the structure of what that's going to look like.
Mama said.
Yes, buddy. Just a minute, please.
Mama said. Mama said.
So, Dr. Beverly, I don't want to dump work on you. I know you have an infant at your house. But if you're up to the challenge, I would ask if you could try to put together a proposed structure and have, please, and have that on an agenda in the near future. Probably not tomorrow, but the 9th. I think would that be the 9th of July? But obviously you and I can speak about that offline as well.
It works out for me. I've heard from some folks that they're interested too, and so putting together a quick kitchen cabinet could be quite easy.
And if people remember, I'm sorry, if people remember,
hi Eddie,
the bond committee, we had a lot of members of the community. We had a lot of different stakeholders, and I'm kind of envisioning that this would be a wonderful way to engage the community, and also to let the community know that we take our responsibility seriously, but we need them to be right there with us. So I think this would be a great opportunity to work together.
Definitely, I think it's important that we reach out to all of our partners, but not forgetting our internal partners, LSEA, LASA, and others. I think it's necessary to incorporate all those perspectives into what we end up doing moving forward. I see Guillermo had something to add.
Yes, Madam Chair, if I may. I still think we need to have that conversation of the board to come up with a really, really strong resolution that speaks to what we want to do. And I think that we, the 9 of us, need to have a real deep discussion about this. It's very important. And it's important that the board be able to address or speak to things that are happening in our community that are affecting our students. And this certainly is. And I think that moving forward, we can have that as a board. What's the word I'm looking for? is that we are there for the community. We represent everybody, okay? And I think that we need to speak on whatever is impacting our students, whoever they may be. But I think this is a very good start, and I certainly support it. So if Madam Sheriff, if you can think about it and set one either special meeting or retreat, I would recommend that.
Thank you, Mr. Lopez. Mrs. Willis?
I just, Mr. Lopez, please know that I have a lot of respect for you. So I hope that this doesn't come out wrong, but I think that we absolutely have a responsibility to educate all of the students in this district and to meet the needs of all the students in this district. But right now we are specifically addressing racial violence and racism towards Black students.
I understand that.
And so the steering committee's focus is specifically meant to be on the response to the racial violence that's happening in Black America. I don't want, if everything becomes a priority, then nothing's a priority. So I think that the committee that should be responsible for looking at all outcomes, and don't get me wrong, everything is in our purview to protect, but this particular committee, this offset, this offshoot, their branch, or whatever you want to call it, should have a very specific focus, because that's what we're calling to do right now.
And my point is,
Madam President.
Well, if I may, Doctor, my point is that I agree with you, but I think the board should all have that deep conversation so that we all are on board. I'm thinking of strengthening it as much as we can.
Sure.
Madam President.
Go ahead, Doc.
Thank you very much. I understand. I want to say more than understand. I want to say more than I feeling. What our communities are suffering today. But one of my students is suffering. I am suffering of this student. They are responsible for every student that comes to Lansing School District. And I want to serve and help every student that comes to Lansing School District. I don't want to give my responsibility to anybody else. If I am not responsible for all students, especially for the one who are suffering the most, my position in this board doesn't need to be. I should leave. I am responsible for the Black, white, but I am more responsible for the situation that we had today, definitely. But I want to be part of the solution, helping our students. That is what Guillermo is trying to explain. Let's go to work together and to present the best opportunities for the Black students, that they come for one for all to be part of our institution and country the way they should be a long time ago. I don't want to pass this opportunity and give it to somebody else. I am responsible. That was the reason I ran 10 years ago. And this is the time for me to put my leadership in favor of these students. I recommend that we meet, that we talk, that we present the best solution for our students as soon as possible.
Dr. Burrows?
Thank you. I'd like to propose, because I think I'm concerned that people are thinking about this in slightly different ways, that we could reach a feasible compromise, which is that the whole board should have a discussion over what our agenda is going to be and over what the structure is going to be. I think the only thing we're doing in the very short term between now and July 9th is having a formal plan on the table so we have something to discuss, right? That's very concrete. And then we can argue about what the details of our action plan is once we have an initial solid proposal that's put forward on how we want to pursue these resolutions, because otherwise we're just going to talk a lot and we're not going to do anything, right? So I think we need something concrete to start with, and then we can amend it and discuss it. And I'm hoping that meets Mr. Lopez's and Dr. Rodriguez's concerns about this, because I think the whole board does need to contribute, but we could all join ultimately whatever steering committee structure that we create that includes other members of the community to try and get some more leverage on this problem. But I think we need to start with a formal proposal. Otherwise, we're just going to talk the issue to death.
That's good to me.
Dr. Burrows, that's fair. And I would like to move this discussion along this evening because you're exactly right. What we're going to do is have a little bit more one-on-one discussion so that we have something prepared to bring to the full board on July 9th. So if everyone is okay with that, then I'm going to move us along this evening. With our thanks again to Dr. Beverly.
That definitely works for me.
Okay, thanks everybody. So on to the big kahuna for this evening is our superintendent evaluation. And we will be moving on to a closed session in which to do that. May I have a motion?
Mr. President.
Doc.
Okay, I move that the Board of Education of the Lansing School District recess into a closed session to discuss personal matters as is permitted under the Open Meeting Act.
I'm just going to add words to your motion because I know the motion was updated.
Updated the superintendent evaluation.
And we're going to so Doc, if I can just make a friendly amendment to your motion, we will be discussing personnel matters and negotiations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Need to support.
I supported it.
Support.
Been moved by Dr. Rodriguez, supported by Dr. Burrows. Sorry. Any discussion? Okay. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Dr. Beverly?
Yes.
Dr. Body? Dr. Body, you're here but still muted.
Yeah, he's muted.
I'll come back. Dr. Burrows?
Yes.
Ms. Hodgin?
Yes.
Mrs. Lawrence?
Yes.
Mrs. Lilji?
Yes.
Mr. Lopez?
Yes.
Dr. Rodriguez?
Yes.
Mrs. Willis?
Yes.
Dr. Body? Good. So motion passes 8-0 with one abstaining.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. To my board colleagues, you're going to leave this session and go into the Zoom closed session.
I'll send the invite in just a second, or I'll be on there in just a second.
Okay.
I just recently sent it back to everybody via too, so.